From partying on million-dollar yachts in Saint-Tropez to funding the move of the century, how did the Great Gatsby of Asia become the world's most wanted man for his white crimes? Jho Low, a Malaysian millionaire, is possibly the most sought white-collar criminal on the planet. Jho Low's luxurious way of life, renowned and influential acquaintances, costly donations, extravagant properties, yachts, and private planes made him the worldwide symbol to what the US Justice Department called the largest kleptocracy case it had ever examined. To really know what happened with this master manipulator, we must first understand where he comes from and his rise. Low was born into a prosperous Malaysian Chinese family. He is of Teochew heritage and grew up on the Penang Island in Georgetown. His family has historically kept an unassuming presence. Low was the third and youngest of three children. He attended Chung Ling High School and the International School of Penang before being admitted to London's prestigious Harrow School. Among its prominent graduates are former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. He took advantage of the chance to establish close relationships with pupils from rich backgrounds, especially Middle Eastern royals. This is also where he made a close connection with Riza Aziz, the stepson of former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak in London, which would proceed to play to his rise in wealth in the future. Low subsequently joined the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School's undergraduate program, where he advanced to make relationships with Malaysians as well as Kuwaiti and Jordanian enterprises and started managing money for his friends and family. Many of his Low's company dealings were in Malaysia, where he assisted a Kuwaiti bank in purchasing a high-rise structure known as the Oval and brought Middle Eastern capital into the nation to fund a commercial district in the south and a new banking district in the capital. By 2007, he created a business partnership with a Malaysian prince, a Kuwaiti sheikh, and a buddy from the United Arab Emirates who later became envoy to the United States and Mexico. 2 years afterwards, he was selling his proposal for a Malaysian sovereign wealth fund. His goal was to invest public money for a common welfare via a trust linked to one of the nation's oil-producing nations. So he began courting the Sultan of Terengganu, who served as Malaysia's king during the country's cyclical royalty. It was all about establishing relationships while making friends. Achievement, he told the Star, is attributable to being in the right place at the right time and meeting the right people, coupled with a trusting relationship. Low's elements came together during April 2009. Mr. Aziz, his friend's stepfather, was elected Malaysian Prime Minister. Mr. Najib has a long-standing stronghold in Malaysian politics. His father, Tun Razak, was the country's second Prime Minister. His uncle was its third. His cousin is now Defence Minister. One can say nepotism runs in the country. Mr. Najib has risen through the political ranks. Member of Parliament at 23, Chief Minister of his home state, Minister of Education, Defence and Finance, and Deputy Prime Minister. The family is tightly intertwined with Malaysia's leading political party, the United Malays National Organisation, whose long hold on power owes much to its close relationship with the country's business elite. That closeness, in turn, has helped engender a culture of corruption, said Zaid Ibrahim, a former Minister of Legal Affairs and Judicial Reform who served alongside Mr. Najib. The State Department's 2010 Human Rights Report stated, officials frequently engaged in corrupt practices with impunity, and underlined a widely held perception of widespread corruption and cronyism within the governing coalition and in government institutions. There have been no confirmed charges related to corruption levelled against Mr. Najib. Nevertheless, he has been plagued by suspicions raised by his rivals in politics in relation to a long-running extortion investigation in France regarding submarines he ordered from a French business while serving as a defence minister. Records discovered by French National Police suggest that the submarine firm paid more than $100 million to a company run by Mr. Najib's close cronies. Furthermore, according to one police document, Mr. Najib sought funds in return for an encounter in Paris in 2001. Low's commercial infatuation with Malaysia's ruler proved temporary, but the new Prime Minister, Mr. Najib, was pleased to have a method to help the entire country, and the nation's sovereign wealth fund was quickly renamed One Malaysia Development Berhad. Mr. Najib was appointed chairman of the board of administrators of 1MDB, a strategic development company. Mr. Low's father's close Penang friend became a director, and two of Low's acquaintances joined the workforce. In the words of three persons who have frequent interactions with 1MDB but asked privacy to maintain ties, Mr. Low wasn't assigned a formal role, but he is often briefed on its operations. Low downplayed his position in 1MDB in a response to the Times, stating that from time to time and without receiving compensation, he's expressed his thoughts on numerous subjects. While Low has no formal role within the fund, British court filings revealed in 2012 that he had produced a letter of encouragement from 1MDB in his investors' failed purchase for the hotel group that includes Claridge's. Referring to the records, he also stated that the finance will be completely covered by Malaysian government investment funds. Low and 1MDB also had relations with Petro Saudi International, an oil drilling company created by a Saudi tycoon and a Saudi royal. 1MDB invested $1 billion in a joint venture with Petro Saudi soon after its formation. Based on public documents, Petro Saudi affiliate bought a Malaysian holding company, UBG, in which Mr. Low and his investors had a significant position. A director of the Petro Saudi subsidiary was a personal friend of Mr. Low, named Jho Low. Petro Saudi has told Malaysian media that the transactions are unconnected, and both individuals stated that Mr. Gare was not representing Mr. Low's interests in the transaction. By 2011, 1MDB had withdrawn from the Petro Saudi joint venture. However, the funds were not promptly sent to Malaysia. Rather, they were placed in a Cayman Islands corporation operated by an investment business that 1MDB had just recently discovered. The funds were returned to 1MDB, according to the fund. Other accusations have included the fund incurring enormous sums of debt and some of its investments benefiting wealthy contributors to Mr. Najib's party. The year before Mr. Low arrived at the Time Warner Center, the New York Press revealed the $23.98 million acquisition of a residence at the Parc Laurel, a few blocks away on West 63rd Street. According to accounts, the investment was made by means of two Swiss citizens, Peter Edward Chadney and Simone Cecil von Grafenried-Simperl, using a shell corporation. Those reports were false. The Swiss buyers were in fact Rothschild bankers. The true entity underlying the shell corporation was Mr. Low, whose spokesperson confirmed to the Times that the property was purchased through an inheritance trust benefiting his family. After almost 3 years, the Lows sold it to Mr. Aziz's shell firm for $33.5 million in cash, a 40% increase. A slew of sham firms were involved in the transaction. Mr. Aziz is described as the sole owner of Sorghum Investments, a British Virgin Island corporation that was operating the shell company that purchased the Parc Laurel condo. The sale of Mr. Low's Beverly Hills home to Mr. Aziz was further hazy. With all this money to spend, Aziz and Low took to Hollywood. Low had an undying need to garner attention to himself as a big spender amongst the strings of A-list celebrities in Hollywood. With the connections he'd made, he broke through to the Hollywood scene by paying models, celebrities to hang out with him and join his extravagant parties. As a pioneer in the yacht girl industry, Low is said to have paid world-famous celebrities like Kendall Jenner, Gigi Hadid, and even Miranda Kerr to his yacht parties during the Cannes Film Festival. Kerr went on to date Low until his downfall in 2015. Mr. Aziz's production firm Red Granite Pictures was relatively unknown when it took up the funding of The Wolf of Wall Street, revealing its plans during the 2011 Cannes Production Festival with a fireworks spectacle and Kanye West concert. The Hollywood Reporter described it as an audacious welcome to the film industry. Neither of its founders had a resume that indicated the expertise or wealth required to fund a film business. Mr. Aziz, now 38, worked as a junior banker at HSBC. Joey McFarland, his partner in business, was a small-time entrepreneur from Kentucky whose background in the world of entertainment involved scheduling paid party performances for celebrities such as Miss Hilton. All of this piqued Hollywood's interest in learning who was funding Red Granite. The accounts appeared to shift over time. According to two persons familiar with the exchange, when Mr. Aziz interviewed a job applicant early on, he stated that the funding came from sovereign wealth. When the Wolf of Wall Street executive producer Irwin Winkler inquired, he was told that Red Granite had a backer in Malaysia, he recounted in a conversation. Mr. Low was presented to him as the backer. As far as I can tell, he's the face of the financing, Mr. Winkler said. Jho Low is seen thanked by DiCaprio, as well as the credits on the movie. Mr. Najib played golf with one of his foreign allies, President Obama, just before Christmas while visiting Hawaii. It was golf diplomacy, the Prime Minister declared after being chastised in Malaysia for golfing as the nation was experiencing the most severe flooding in years. It was also part of Mr. Najib's ongoing endeavour to bring his nation closer to Washington. Mr. Obama made the first formal visit to Malaysia by an American president since 1966 earlier this year. Following that, he and Mr. Najib stated that they would elevate their relationship to a comprehensive partnership of political and economic connections. A White House spokesperson declined to comment on the president's friendship with Mr. Najib. Mr. Najib has positioned himself as a centrist who is looking ahead. Yet, on topics including political speech freedom to decades-old laws that favour the Malay majority over the nation's ethnic minorities, he's failed to deliver on pledged improvements that would irritate his more conservative adversaries. His government's pursuit of a key opposition member, Anwar Ibrahim, on sodomy allegations has enraged opponents both at home and abroad. a decision on Mr. Anwar's appeal is likely any day. For an unprecedented period in more than 4 decades, the opposition swept the popular vote in the 2013 elections. Mr. Najib was just able to keep his post because of the allotment of seats in Parliament had just been adjusted to favour rural areas where the party's alliance was dominant. Within hours following the declaration, protesters took to the streets of Kuala Lumpur. 1MDB, the Malaysian sovereign wealth fund created and run by Jho Low, has not made any savings. It essentially raised funds based on its independent status. Individuals were willing to contribute to it, believing that the Malaysian government was behind it and that they were going to make good on any debt repayments if necessary. Thus, it accumulated all of this debt. Goldman Sachs acquired a significant portion of the debt. It was 3 $6.5 billion bonds. Reports suggest that they may have raised $13 billion during the duration of the fund, so it's close to half. What's hilarious about that loan is that Goldman Sachs received around $650 million in fees and associated earnings, which is a huge profit. On a bond issuance, you may see around 1%. This amounted to 10%. They added, listen, the customer wanted everything fast and secret. What is definitely being investigated is how this arrangement came about. Were there any warning signs? It raised several red flags. There's a lot of that information being examined over and studied, and there's a growing consensus that Goldman Sachs must relinquish all of those gains, the $650 million. However, there are several regulators looking into it. There's also legal lawsuit pending against Goldman Sachs, for example, by one of the Abu Dhabi sovereign wealth funds involved in this whole mess. People are asking if Goldman Sachs will be punished severely for this. At the time, it's difficult to predict where it will go. Finally, Javier Justo, a Swiss banker and ex-Petro-Saudi director, revealed the scam to media and detectives, prompting international law enforcement agencies to accuse Low with money laundering and Najib with criminal breach of trust, money laundering and misuse of authority. Due to the structure of the wealth fund, the Malaysian government has to repay around $7.5 billion of the fund's outstanding debt, which is comparable to approximately 2.5% of the country's GDP and will affect Malaysian taxpayers for centuries to come. Jho Low was indicted in the United States. He's been prosecuted in Malaysia. Interpol has received demands for his arrest. In New York, the Goldman Sachs associate who was engaged in the entire plan pled guilty to his participation and proved the plot was true. Yet another of his Goldman colleagues was apprehended in Malaysia on the US arrest order. Then there's this fresh occurrence in which a former Justice Department low-level official pled guilty to his involvement as well. While at the Department of Justice, he assisted in the transfer of tens of millions of dollars to the United States for the purpose of lobbying the US government to drop the entire investigation. Look at the end of it all. The Malaysian people will have to pay the price of the work of a few greedy individuals. Do we see a future where Jho Low will be brought to justice? When looking at the many periods, there is the start, which is the formation of the fund, and the existence at large. Then it collapses, and the inquiries begin. Then there's this time where he's on the run, cultivating what turns out to be these incredibly deep contracts with the Chinese government. He's said to be in China, where he's safe. That is because he was able to convert the 1MDB problem into a prospect for China. In Malaysia, the Prime Minister was dealing with this issue. There was money disappearing, but he was assuring people it wasn't missing and banking on re-election. China came in and took part in all of the aforementioned infrastructure investments, allowing them to return money to the federal government. They utilised that to fill some of the gaps to demonstrate that there is nothing currently. There will be no consequences and relevance to the accusations, that it is all a conspiracy, that it's not genuine. In exchange, Malaysia leaned heavily toward China. Due to the increasing stakes of this operation, there only exists two options for Jho Low. Either Malaysia and China will manage a deal to end the racks of debt, or that Low's fate lies in China for the time being.